Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
I'm Wayne Callan, and you're listening to another ADHD Experts webinar at Attitude. Today's webinar is sponsored by the GAO School, a college prep co-ed boarding and day school for students grades 6 through 12 with dyslexia and similar-based learning disabilities, also offering a 5-week summer program for campers ages 8 through 16. The URL is www.gao.org. Today's webinar is devoted to the many parents and their children struggling with writing at school and at home. For several years now, several times a week, parents have written in desperately looking for suggestions to neaten up their child's handwriting or to improve their ability to write essays on tests or on assignments. The common refrains are, his handwriting is so sloppy the teacher can't read it, or he doesn't know what to write about or get started on the writing assignment. Few of us know how to tackle these challenges, and that goes for the schools as well, many of which don't recognize dysgraphia, a learning disability that affects handwriting, spelling, and the ability to put thoughts down on paper. Kendra Wagner, on the other hand, knows all about dysgraphia and writing challenges. She is a reading and writing specialist who is certified in several programs for dyslexia and dysgraphia. She also works with schools to keep everyone up to speed on best practices in literacy. Kendra will give us strategies and approaches today to help children better express themselves. So I'll turn it over to Kendra now, and thanks for being here.
Hey, hello, everybody. Now, what's new information about what we know about dysgraphia, newer than 10 years ago, is that it is not only about handwriting. It is also defined as a learning disability that affects written output, so the productivity of writing. And a lot of the mythology around dysgraphia is that you just have to teach them to hold a pencil and it'll be fine. But it's much more nuanced and complex than that, as many of us know. Now, today's webinar is more geared towards the older students and the idea of how to get writing organized, fluent, creative, and on the page, and being able to get your voice and your opinion on paper, too, in our essay format. So we're on the slide right now of, well, why do we write? Kids think just to get a good grade. I ask a lot of students this, because in my private practice, I work one-on-one with kids. So when I mention my students, that's what I mean. It's I'm not in the classroom anymore. For 7 years, I've been in private practice. I say, so why do you think you write? And a lot of them just say, well, so that the teacher gets the assignment, and so that, they don't even know that they're writing to learn how to think and to learn how to write summaries, and because writing is a lifelong skill. So I always start with that. And so this slide is for you and for them and for just starting that conversation. Why do we even write? Why do we learn to? And they also, students also have a misconception that there's only a few careers that require it, like novelists and maybe lawyers, but they don't realize that many careers require writing. So I'm always emphasizing that too, and more in our digital age, you have to be able to write. So now we're in the, well, why is it so complex? Especially compared to reading and math. Why is writing so hard? And most teachers do realize this, but not all of them. They're sometimes mystified, like, but your child is so great at math and reading, but when it's time to write, they struggle so much. I don't understand. Well, especially in an ADD brain, and especially in a dysgraphia brain, it is so much harder to hold all those pieces. So it does become this much more multi-layered process to become proficient in. Because all of these inside your head, this long list of 6 things, are required to be a good writer. So working memory, which we all know ADD children are challenged by, affects writing. So a very large percentage, depending on which researcher you ask, sort of 60 to 90% of every person with ADD struggles with writing because of this. So I wouldn't put this in front of a kid. This is for you to look at this list. But I do talk about their working memory and how it takes more focus than other sports or academic activities in their life. So all of this makes a good writer. Then, of course, there is spelling, which I could do an entire other webinar on. And I do want to address that it is a roadblock, but we just aren't going to dive into that today. And how you know if spelling is a big roadblock is when you ask them to tell a story and you are the one that's scribing or writing or typing. And if it is pretty smooth and makes sense, then we know that the part of the reason that they're roadblocked by writing is spelling and probably handwriting. So that's a good quickie assessment is let's see how much they're struggling with writing. Can they make sense and string a story or a summary or nonfiction piece together when you're the one doing the writing? Now, of course, there's all sorts of other things with that, but do they use large enough words? Because I say it's not true that if you can talk, you can write, even though a lot of teachers tell kids that. I say that's not true because you have to use a different voice and more complex language to get your writing self out on the page. So the next list, now I do cover this with children just out loud all the time. I'm always talking about what is the reader going to see in their head when you write, and does that sentence make sense? So I cover a lot of sentence structure and text structures. Do they understand the difference between writing a story and writing a nonfiction essay? They tend to be sometimes a little bit more robotic when they're writing their stories, or they tend to have too much of an informal voice when they're writing their nonfiction pieces. So you have to explain the difference over and over. And I ask a lot of students, what's the difference between revising and editing? And they'll look at me like glassy-eyed, or they'll say, well, editing is capitals and revising is periods. I mean, they just don't always understand that there is this tiny, tiny thing called editing, which is looking for the smaller pieces. My little memory trick is edit is a smaller word than revise. So you're fixing smaller things. And then revising is the big ideas and the big sentences, and we'll get to that today. And also having the ability to pick great language, great words. Word choice is a very common and frequent goal I have with my students, and how to get that onto the page. And then the very last one, self-regulation, of course, that comes into play with the working memory and being able to keep yourself focused on the assignment. So this is what Wayne had already mentioned, and it is what struggling writers might see in their head is a detailed movie, but it just doesn't always get into the page, and it's our job to figure out what those roadblocks are. Now, again, in the classroom, your average teacher is confused by this. Oh, but they have such great ideas, but then it doesn't get it onto the page. So they must just be lazy, or they must not be trying harder, they must need more time. So that's not always true. Those three things are not always true. They just need much more scaffolding than your average classroom teacher might have knowledge about or the time to do. Okay, so we're going to cover mechanics quickly because there is a lot of other information out on the internet, and especially in the Attitude website, in articles, one that I've written, and some webinars, I believe. But the mechanics is the first roadblock we're going to go through. And this is a technical way of describing what's going on with the fine motor part of handwriting. Very important to get kids writing with a tripod grip. There's a few other options for that besides tripod, but that's the most common and the trajectory towards being able to do fluent and fast and effortless writing. So many options for pencil grips, but just make sure that it does emphasize the tripod. And I like to give kids an option so that they feel some choice in the matter. And at first they will say, well, this makes it harder. So be ready for that. A lot of the occupational therapists talk about that too. At first it feels harder because they're changing a habit. And so they don't feel like it makes them faster, more fluent, and more effortless. They want to go back to their old grip. But very important because of what we just talked about with the musculature of the hand. So I explained to them that we're working on getting their thoughts to go as fast as their hand, or their hand to go as fast as their thoughts. Then there's a whole research base out there about whether to do print versus cursive, and a lot of the dyslexia schools move through both. They master print and then they master cursive, and some leap over print where they make an individual decision about a child to decide if that's appropriate. But it is an incredible thing to watch where a child has been struggling with print for so long, and suddenly you teach them cursive and they just fly. So I think it's very individual according to the student. But it is important to get one of them fluent, print or cursive, before you go on to keyboarding. Okay, so these are some other little tools that you may have heard of course, that can help with getting the handwriting easy, effortless. I'm not such a huge fan of this, but a lot of people say it makes a difference. It's a very short-term tool that you would use just for kids who have trouble staying in the lines, because then they can actually have the kinesthetic feel of it. So they actually have a texture to them, these pages. So there's a lot of apps out there. These are my favorites. Handwriting Without Tears and Wet Dry Try are both by the same company. And then Writing Wizard and Letter School and iTrace are just mastery of letters and numbers. Both of them are in there. And you can design it to practice single letters, or let's see, Writing Wizard is the only one that will let you do some short words. And I, of course, have students do that with a stylus so that we're not practicing our forefinger, we're practicing our pencil grip. So the research on intervention with writing starts a lot with sentences. Like you look at the big research of non-learning disability writing, and that is more focused on, getting writing workshop going in the classroom, getting kids to act like professional writers where they have many pieces going at once. And they don't really go diving into the sentence level for very long. I think because teachers don't know to do that, or because they haven't read the learning disability research, or because it's so time intensive to do sentence level. But practicing, let's write a great sentence as a classroom or a one-on-one situation. Let's write a great sentence that has a who and a where and a what. Or let's write a great sentence that's over 15 words that explains our rainy day recess yesterday, or explains our field trip last week. So really getting a sentence to give a picture to the reader or tell a story. So this kind of practice that is listed on this slide is what I start with a lot. And often the children who come to me have struggled a lot with essays or making their writing in any format make sense. And then I just dial way back to here, and I don't even start with their essays. I start at this level. So let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about in these 5. So this is an example of a student that she's in 7th grade. And I'm highlighting to make sure that her sentences are clear or complete, or that actually here it's to make sure she has enough evidence. So there's many, many ways to highlight. Sometimes I just go through a student's essay and I highlight all the why parts. That's all. It's not about correcting it. It's just, let's see how many whys there are here. And there might be a whole page without any. And if the prompt said, explain why, the prompt from the teacher or from me, then we have some work to do. So another thing I'll look at in just the sentence level is let's look and see how many sentences have strong verbs. I'm not even looking at the whole essay. I'm just looking sentence by sentence with them. Let's see how many, if they're middle schoolers, are complex or compound sentences. So I'm making sure that each sentence has a reason for being there, has some grammatical correctness, and whatever our goals are, it might be, it has an introductory phrase, or we know how to put a prepositional phrase in there, or we are working on having strong verbs. So this is an adaptation that I have made myself from Landmark School. So in your handout, towards the end, not the slides, but the handout, there is a list of books, and 2 of them are from the Landmark School. And the Landmark School spends a lot of time doing these kind of sentences before they go into paragraphs and essays. So this is just one of my many that I do with children. I have some different ones that have an adjective or that have a different phrasing at the end here. So they practice this with their parents, and then we were just seeing, okay, well, which is your favorite, and which do you think is the strongest, and which do you think gives the reader the best picture? So sometimes I let them be silly, like a Subway sandwich teleported to San Francisco. And I don't let them say is or was. That's very hard for some students to use stronger verbs. So here is another research piece, sentence combining, which the rewards program does a lot of, which is in the list of resources in your handout. Taking those short, full sentences, but short, and combining them into one. Many, many versions of sentence combining. You can have 2 or 3 or 4 short pieces, and then you combine them. So that, again, is something you'll find in the learning disability literature, but not so much in the regular classroom. And some kids just sail through this, and other kids, it takes a lot of focus to make it make sense and to have them remove the correct things and add the correct things without changing the meaning. So that allows me to insert a little grammar instruction. See how the one on the right, Lucky, have the cutest big brown eyes. So you can teach why there needs to be a comma in the big and brown, between big and brown. So I do a lot of that, and sometimes I take poetry apart with them and recombine it. So here's the other approach to sentence practice. I have them write sentences that no one's going to grade, no one's going to change, no one's going to comment on. Just let's be funny, or a little bit silly, because they might have pictures that are humorous from cartoons or comic strips. But low pressure, that's just my humor of the hot on the stove. So I start with a picture from National Geographic or a funny one. There's a lot of National Geographics for kids that I use. And I just say, well, let's write a caption. And sometimes I will have a strict guideline of it has to be more than 10 words, or you have to use at least one good verb, or you have to use 2 adjectives. So depending on the student, I put those parameters in, and then they get to write a caption. It's just, like I say, low pressure. I'm not going to change it. I might say, oh, well, that doesn't really capture the whole picture. Let's try again. But mostly it's just really good to have them practice this. It actually is a way of teaching the main idea, too. If you think about writing titles for short stories or short articles or stories, that's the next step, is they read a very short piece and then they write their own title. So that's not a full sentence. That's just a short phrase. But removing the text from cartoon bubbles, they love that, especially if they love graphic novels. So that's a really good way to get them engaged, the graphic novel kids. So this is what most parents talk to me about when I'm asking them what their child struggles most with. They say, oh, getting started. And I often say, well, what do they do in the classroom? Well, they brainstorm sometimes, but only out loud. So I teach them steps to first either draw or write. And ADD kids do not always want to do this. They want to just get started. But the good news and bad news about brainstorming is that it helps you narrow down your topic and your thoughts so that you are doing less revising at the end. So this is just a tiny picture at the bottom of somebody's brainstorm. So teachers do a great job of doing this out loud, like I said, but then students start to write and they can't always remember everything that was orally talked about in the classroom. So I put this as a goal with many of my students, that they have to do a brainstorm first. This is one of the many versions of a fictional organizer. So brainstorming first, then this would be called a pre-write or a graphic organizer. Very important again. So many students I work with. So what are you working on in school? Because my time with them isn't all one-on-one working on schoolwork, but I do address it and I do spend some of our session. And they'll say, oh, I have to write this little summary about Mesopotamia. And I said, okay, and how did you get started? Well, just with a piece of paper. I said, yeah, but did you do any organizer? Well, no. So that's often, it feels like it's too much time to the child. It's often resisted. I don't want to do an organizer. I don't want to do an outline. I don't want to do, but research and my experience is that it helps them keep a through line in their writing, and they don't go off on many tracks or get stuck just staring at the page. They have something visual to be looking at. So a lot of the students I work with are highly visual, so this would stay in front of them while they're writing or typing. And this is a version that's for nonfiction, expository, as they call it in schools. And the essay outline is usually very much like this. Sometimes the attention getter isn't there. Sometimes the thesis is just called my topic. This is a middle school friendly or high school friendly one. And again, good teachers will have students fill this out first, and then they get a grade on this, or they revise this. The teacher looks at it and makes sure that this is going to be the springboard that will work. If there's glaring omissions or way too much in one of the boxes, then the teacher can help them. And then again, this stays in front of them while they write the rest of their paper. So this is still all in the getting started. We haven't even started our draft yet, right? And then this can be partial sentences. You don't have to write full sentences in here. So this can be for mostly nonfiction, but even a story level. So now we get to drafting. So we're keeping that organizer. We've done our brainstorm. We're keeping the organizer in front of us, and like it says on the second bullet. And it's hard to have kids not worry about spelling or punctuation yet. Sometimes it depends on the student. Sometimes they get caught up in that. And skipping lines is hugely important. Why? Because I know it wastes paper, but kids resist that sometimes too. Because then the teacher or adult or themselves can more easily make inserts and edits and revisions. So why no erasing? Only because it takes up a lot of energy. Sometimes you want to see, as the adult, what they originally wrote. So if they erase, I don't know. But if they cross out with one line, then it gives me more insight into, oh, well, what did they think wasn't good enough? I want to see their revision process. I want to see what they thought wasn't good. Because sometimes it's actually got some great words to use. So I say, wait, let's not take this whole crossed out part out. Let's use some of it. And every IEP and article you read about learning disabilities and dysgraphia, it all says break down the process. So that's what I've been doing so far, is talking about working at the sentence level, making sure they break it down into an organizer. But then once we're starting, how do we keep breaking it down? Well, there's one program you may have heard of called Step Up to Writing. So this is a color coding program. It doesn't go like step by step, like you don't take the program and go day 1, day 2, day 3. It's more of just a framework to use. So I do a lot of this once we've started to do the draft, of making sure with highlighters that we are using all of the components of a nonfiction piece of writing. So when we're starting to teach paragraphing, this is listed in the back of your handout again, Step Up to Writing. So I do a lot of that. And again, with our visual kids who are very visual, then we definitely want them to use their strength. And this makes it very clear to them. This is an example of a report that's given on elephants. So if it had a whole lot of red and only one yellow, I would say, oops, we did a little too much explaining about that one fact, and we need 3 facts, remember, in most paragraphs. So the 3 big facts are large animals like elephants head to rivers to cool off and clean up. That's one. The next one is a couple sentences later, the big fact. Smaller animals like rabbits also take time to clean. Finally, little creatures like birds enjoy bathing in puddles. So I'll take a highlighter or a colored pencil with them and go through and to make sure that they have these 3 facts that I just read out loud that make sense reading them alone. It would be a very short paragraph, but it would make sense. The red is just enhancing, elaborating, explaining, giving examples. There's all these E words I use with them, giving events. And this is a big reminder for during many steps of the writing process. Teachers use this often to do show, don't tell. I say to you, it's like using a zoom lens. Some teachers say there's a seed and then there's a watermelon. So different metaphors that they use. So the room was a mess. I say, where's the picture in your head? And they sometimes even will say, well, the TV room. And I say, see, we don't know where that is. So again, I'm taking this and working with it as a examination of what makes it better. Why is this one better? And well, let's see. I see 3 adjectives and there's none in the first sentence. I would hope they say that. And then pushed my way into the bedroom. Good verb. And then we also know it's a bedroom, not just a room. So this is an example of how I might highlight it. The telling sentence, the boy was very frightened. I always say, that's true, and it's accurate, and it's a full sentence. If it's theirs, yeah, that's great. And frightened is a great adjective. I always start with the positive, yay. Let's see how we can make this into 2 sentences and add more show, don't tell. So big goal of a lot of my students. It looks a little different when you're doing show, don't tell in a essay, but you still want to do like your average persuasive essay or factual report. You still want to do show, don't tell, definitely. So I talk a lot about those phrases in the little box, how phrase, why phrase, where phrase. That's my terminology, but it's also known as just a prepositional phrase. Sometimes I use it interchangeably, but when I'm first introducing it, I just talk about the how and why and where. And then a show, don't tell issue is that many students rely on that word things. There's a lot of stuff I know about hockey, is one kid wrote last week. So that is another hurdle to get over for some. How can we say that without using the word things? So sometimes I let them use a thesaurus, but often a thesaurus is overwhelming because there are only a few words in that long list that would really fit as a replacement. So mostly this just comes out of a conversation. And then getting past the, I'm done. Kids just want to be done, right? And they're kind of shocked when I tell them that their favorite author actually goes through a lot of revisions before they publish their book. So this is what I say you need to do. You have to do one of these things, maybe 2. This is their checklist for revising. Famous authors, J.K. Rowling does this when she's writing a book. They're pleasantly shocked. Really? So when they're resisting, they're revising, I put this in front of them and tell them, okay, at least do 2 of those bullets. You have to do at least 2. So that's a very helpful aid, and it's in your handout. And then looking at a rubric, or that was a checklist because it didn't have any numbers, the arms, but then this is called a rubric. That's helpful too, and I know teachers give them, and sometimes they are a little too vague or a little too overwhelming. It's a challenge to get a rubric that's just right for that child. That's something they can really, truly follow. And here are some of my examples of good resources. There's many more in the end of your handout. And then there's also the conversation around what tools can dysgraphic kids use. Speech to text is what I'm looking at on the far left. And now they have a more updated version. Is they have Google Docs has a speech to text one too. So those are helpful, although they still have to go back in and revise and edit. It's not a done deal for them just to talk and the screen shows up and there's their essay. Okay, and I'm going to hand it over to Wayne.
Well, that was really excellent, Kendra. Really, I learned a lot myself. So now, all the questions that have been asked. A lot of questions about pencil grips. Can you change a child's grip after 8? One parent asked, can you actually use a pencil grip at age 18? So A lot of questions about that, so I would like to give them an answer on that.
Okay. Well, yes, you can use them at all ages. And some very specialized pencils, not pencil grips, but pencils, were originally, there's one called Twist and Write. And I don't have that anywhere in my handouts. Twist and Write. And they were designed for people who are recovering from strokes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of dysgraphic kids and adults use them for comfort. So now they're just sold and everywhere, not just from the medical profession.
Right.
So, so they should be, though, in a child, a kind of temporary thing. And then you want, the OTs say this, that you want to wean them off of them eventually. But there's some that just need them off and on for the rest of their life.
But let's say a child hasn't used one and suddenly, okay, I'll try it at age 9. Would it be too late or always helpful?
No, it's harder to unravel the bad habit, but it's a little more challenging than a kindergartner. But yeah, it's absolutely doable.
Okay. Jennifer has a question. I strongly suspect my 4th grader has dysgraphia. The school seems reluctant to pursue this line of inquiry. What suggestions do you have to help me convince the school it's valid and important to investigate?
Oh, very good question. So there's some great handouts at the IDA website, International Dyslexia Association, and they're just called fact sheets. And there's a couple on dysgraphia. So if you have a very simple handout like that to show the teachers, these are the things that I see. He's, showing 10 of these 12 checklists, and this is the International Dyslexia Association. And so they might not agree to test him because he's not quote unquote undergrade level, but there are 4 assessments that do test for dysgraphia. One is the TOWL, TOWE, test of written language, test of written expression, and then the Woodcock-Johnson and the Wyatt. So those 4 really capture dysgraphia as at 4th grade level. So you might have to get an outside assessment in order to bring that into the school. But the word dysgraphia, again, doesn't make sense to a lot of average 4th grade teachers. So you could go for having a written expression learning disability, and they don't have to agree to using the word dysgraphia. Written expression is just as good. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows about the understood.org that has a lot of helpful resources for parents.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever a case that a child's sloppy handwriting sort of straightens out and neatens up as he gets older? Does it ever get better, or does it remain the same?
Yes, it often gets better, but never fast. So there's a lot of ADD and dysgraphic kids who have intervention and then get a lot better. But then whenever they speed up, it gets sloppy again.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like some dyslexic kids. Their reading gets very improved and accurate, but they're never fast.
Mm-hmm. Patricia has a question. How can I help our 12-year-old improve spelling? She is in middle school and writing the same word 10 times every time she makes an error. What can I do?
Oh, there's not a lot of research on that, writing them over and over. So,
well, how would
there's some what kind of multisensory work is she doing? Every spelling intervention for dysgraphia or dyslexic kids has to do with writing in the air or writing it on a table or making sure that there's some multisensory component also. Or doing the word that she continues to misspell, writing it, and then putting a box around the section that she keeps misspelling. So that's the only part of the word that needs attention, is the one that she keeps misspelling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something she could email me, and I can send her a couple little handouts on tips for spelling practice.
Uh-huh. How can a parent recognize the budding signs of dysgraphia in, let's say, a 3 or 4-year-old? Is there anything to look for?
Yes, in the because at that point there's going to be drawing more than writing their name, and so how are they with two things? Comfort and effortless in holding any kind of writing instrument or crayon, and then stamina too. Can they take their time with a drawing? Sometimes if they aren't willing to sit with it, that can be a little bit of a marker for dysgraphia.
Mm-hmm. Another parent asked, my daughter's fine motor skills are weak. What would be some good exercises to strengthen them?
How old is she?
7.
Oh, so that's a good chopstick one. This is not in my handout. So take a long chopstick and you hold it like you would a pencil, and you have it be parallel to the ground, horizontal. And you just walk down and up that chopstick, very light grip, with the same grip that you use, that you have a pencil for. Mm-hmm. So there's that, which emphasizes not using those other two, ring finger and pinky finger. Those shouldn't touch the chopstick. And then there's a lot of tools for, hand strengthening that are like stress balls. Those are very good. Mm-hmm. And also putting your hand down flat onto a washcloth or towel and gripping it into a fist. So you're starting flat with all of your 5 fingers flat against the washcloth and then pulling it up. That is really good for all of your hand strengthening. Mm-hmm. And that can become a game with her.
Yeah, that sounds good. When you refer to the tripod grip, a couple of people asked, they just wanted to know exactly what 3 fingers were being used. I know you had a photo, but I just want to clarify that.
Oh, good. So it is the thumb, the pointer finger, and the middle finger. Mm-hmm. And usually it's emphasized that the middle finger is resting lightly on the far side, so of the instrument.
Oh, okay.
Because you don't want to use a lot of wrist muscle to write. That's part of what makes kids want to stop. Is if their grip is too tight, mm-hmm. then their wrist muscles are being used.
I see.
And instead, it should be mostly in the cross of your hand, in your metatarsals. Those muscles should be being used.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen asks, what is the tool or technique you most recommend for beginner writers? I know that's general, but I think, is there any way to get into a good habit of writing right from the beginning? I guess that's what she's asking.
Oh, yeah. So like a kindergartner, you mean, or a first grader?
She didn't give it. Age 7.
Oh, that's a good age, because I would say not until 7 to do, if you have the time, a story that you write a sentence and then they write a sentence, but it's all the same story. Mm-hmm. So you hand the page over. It's just the same idea as shared reading. Okay, I'm going to read a page, then you read a page. But this is, we're going to create a story, and you're taking away some of the, fine motor for them and spelling and all that. So you do one sentence that they think of and another sentence. They think of the whole story. Or you can do it like popcorn where they think of a sentence and then your idea is the next sentence. So it can be either their entire ideas of creativity or you can make a story that is both of your ideas. But the trading off is an excellent way to have them see how powerful their writing can be. Mm-hmm. You can keep working on it for several nights. So that's one way, because a 7-year-old would be overwhelmed by, okay, every night you're going to write in a journal. That's a little much for a 7-year-old.
Right.
But you can also do, let's write a sentence about what you did today and give me 2 of the most important things in that sentence. So it's kind of a game or a challenge.
Mm-hmm. This is a more scientific question. Are there good resources describing the neurological challenges of dysgraphia and handwriting? What actually is happening in a child's brain?
Yes.
And what is their experience of the challenge?
Well, the woman that did all of that research pretty much is Virginia Berninger.
Could you spell that?
At the University of Washington. So it's Berninger.
Okay.
And she has a book on dyslexia and dysgraphia. That's in the title. And then she has a lot of research. And then the other person who's done that research is Sally Shaywitz in Yale, who has done a lot of the MRI work. And she has the book called Overcoming Dyslexia. Mm-hmm. And then she also has a big website, Yale, the study of dyslexia or something. You can find it by searching her, Shaywitz.
Mm-hmm. And that's Shaywitz?
Uh-huh.
Okay. One element, and I guess this has to do with more the physical act of handwriting, what role does an occupational therapist play? One parent asked, my daughter's been struggling with handwriting since she was 4. She's 9 now. Is it too late to meet with an occupational therapist to work on this?
No. Most occupational therapists will take all ages. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's harder to get them to do their sort of homework that the occupational therapist will give them because they're older, because that's essential. You don't want to go daily to the occupational therapist. So right. that's where the improvement and progress is going to happen, is from the practice work.
So an occupational therapist can help.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Another parent asks, I know we went through the tools of handwriting pretty quickly. She wants to know, how do slant boards help?
Oh, yes. So there's an emphasis when you have a slant board. It almost forces them to be a little bit better in their posture, mm-hmm. right? And for the hand motion, the wrist, it prevents them from quite as much tension in their wrist, because it's hard to press so hard. It's tricky to explain, but the slant board is like it's a temporary tool, of course, where you are forcing them to be a little bit more upright. And it's for those kids that really press into their forearm, and this they can't. It kind of lifts their forearm and their wrist off the page. And right. Some students tend to press their wrist and their forearm into their page, and you can't really do that with the slant board. Mm-hmm. So that's for younger kids.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a parent asks, and this might key into what you just said, is, let's see, are gross motor skills involved in handwriting and dysgraphia? Is full body coordination affected directly by dysgraphia?
There's some research on that, where getting your body ready means, that you do some jumping jacks, or you do some cross-lateral, or, movements where you're crossing the midline of the body. And mm-hmm. So you're getting your brain ready. Yeah, there's some good research on that being a component, not a huge factor, but a component where mm-hmm. a lot of kids who have trouble with gross motor and coordinating their movements, then it's almost like you have to handle that first, address that first, before you're expecting the fine motor to come.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And there's a gifted school here that's doing some research on that, where a lot of kids with handwriting issues, so they're looking at how the gross motor and addressing that first creates better fine motor results.
Just one last quick question, because we're coming to the end of the hour, but a parent asked, my daughter's processing speed is so fast that her fingers can't keep up, and she makes typos.
Oh.
Would she be able to use shorthand when taking notes? I mean, this really doesn't address handwriting per se as much as getting through a class.
Yeah, that's another skill. Shorthand is great. And I wonder, when you say that she can't type fast, has she tried speech-to-text software?
That's true. Would you need an accommodation for that?
Usually you do, yes, because then whatever class she's in, the accommodation should cover that being available to her. She has a laptop, or she has something that is always available to her if a class is stopping and starting to do a writing thing, even in science. So the accommodation should not just be for English class. It should be for any time that she needs to do some significant writing, that it's always available.
Right. Well, that was terrific, Kendra. Really, just helpful and inspiring. You did a great job of putting this challenging stuff in perspective, and you provided loads of practical tips, so I was very impressed.
Okay, thanks, Wayne.
So I'm sure parents picked up a lot of practical tips. And once again, the webinar was sponsored by the Gow School, a college prep co-ed boarding and day school for students, grades 6 through 12, with dyslexia and similar language-based learning disabilities, also offering a 5-week summer program for campers ages 8 through 16. So the URL is www.gow.org, and have a good day, everyone.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Ever tried reading while jogging, cooking, or even juggling flaming torches? Yeah, it doesn't end well. But with audiobooks.com, you can conquer books without the circus act. Dive into over 450,000 titles, including more than 10,000 free ones. Get hooked on a bestseller, find your next obsession, or finally read that classic you've been avoiding since high school. And here's the inside scoop. Sign up today for a free 30-day trial and snag your first 3 audiobooks on the house. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.